If we do not understand how to build wealth, we cannot be financially secure and we can never really be free. Each of us needs to understand the language of money, and we shouldn't continue to wait for negative events or stressful situations to be motivated into action. Today on Shak, we have Damilola Gittens, who is a Nigerian born certified financial planner and chartered investment manager based on the west coast of Canada. She's an advocate for financial planning and education, and she's also passionate about empowering women to take charge of their finances and their futures. Welcome, Damilola, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So recently, I've been discussing the fact that there seems to be insufficient financial education in many homes and in schools. So I'm curious as to what was your own experience of learning money management and personal finance, if it was something that you learned at home.
Oh man, how did it all start? To be honest, talking about finances at home wasn't really a thing. The most I heard about finances or money at home would be arguments between my parents.
That's interesting.
Right? I'm sure everyone can relate to that
It's
in
true.
some way. Yeah. But my parents will argue, and I always used to think, I don't want that to be me when I grow up. But I never really asked any questions. So my journey actually began in university, taking a course on money and banking. And when I took that course, it sort of opened my mind to how else we could relate to money. And then through my work experiences, I learned more about credit, for instance, which was so foreign, especially coming from Nigeria to Canada. And that's truly how it began. I just kept learning and learning and learning as much as I could.
Okay, so I guess it was more in a formal setting than necessarily like at home. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, having grown up in Nigeria and studying and living in Canada, would you say there are difference in views on money and investing in general, like in your own experience?
Oh, that's a really deep one. Money for a Nigerian is quite different from money as a Canadian. There are certain things like planning ahead that is very much a focus in Canada. Like you start talking about retirement planning
It's true.
as early as possible, right? Most people on the street will talk about investing or, what they're doing with their money. You don't really get that in Nigeria. I mean, people talk about money, but maybe more the lack thereof or how to spend it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But lots of people in Nigeria too are small business owners. So they're more invested in putting money back into their own businesses, and the hustle culture is alive and well.
Okay.
Yeah. I find that they also don't have as much trust, maybe in some of the institutions. I know my grandfather like bought stocks for my mom, but other than that, I never really hear people talking about investing. Probably more so now than before, though.
Okay. So here in Barbados and the region, some persons have managed their money via a susu or meeting turn, which is believed to be of African origin and was particularly useful at a time where the poor and largely Black population did not have sufficient access or trust or knowledge of the formal financial system. In your own experience, what do you think are some of the things that kind of hold persons back from undertaking financial planning and some of the opportunities available for building wealth?
Oh, that's a great question. I think most people find it challenging to connect with someone they can trust. And when it comes to financial planning, it's very much about that relationship. Like knowing that the person you've shared all your business with
It's true.
is going to keep it confidential and actually look out for you. That is huge. You probably like at least growing up, like with my family, my mom wasn't very trusting. Again, she seems to have been a big influence when it comes to how I think about money.
Fair enough.
No surprise, but she didn't really trust a lot of people, so she wouldn't have participated in something like a susu, even though I know it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, in turn, didn't trust that sort of system. I more prefer, something that's set. There are guidelines, there are rules, people are held accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having a system like that can help people to feel more comfortable about talking about their finances and actually getting the advice they need.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, maybe you can give us, a brief rundown of money management, some of the key things you feel we should know in terms of, managing our finances and, in our endeavor to build wealth, some important things we should know.
Yeah. So, firstly, it starts with knowing where your money's going.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know where your money's going, then how can you figure out how to keep more of it?
True.
So,
Very true.
one one thing I ask most people is, okay, what are you spending on month to month? And I find that if we were to write down what it was and then take a look at their actual statements, there's usually a gap.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. True.
we tend, we tend to spend a little more than we realize, on day-to-day stuff, whether it's, impromptu purchases or, just general living life. So the first thing is to know where your money's going.
Mm-hmm.
Once you know where your money's going, then you can actually control where you'd like to put your money. So if it's saving towards future goals, you can properly allocate the funds you have for those. So second thing would be to write down what those goals are
Mm-hmm.
so that you know
Mm-hmm.
what you're working towards. And then thirdly, if you feel like you don't know how to invest or how to manage it appropriately, look for help. Like just seek
Mm-hmm.
help,
Yeah.
ask questions. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It'll take you much further seeking that help than not.
Okay. Right. So yeah, so definitely we'll try to remember some of those things. So I know, as you said, kind of people are kind of apprehensive. The relationship is about trust and that kind of thing. So how do you encourage people to think about their financial future without feeling overwhelmed, or they're not smart enough to invest, or to save, or to get their finances in order? Kind of how do you kind of help them to, I guess, to build trust and to kind of understand what it is they need to do, and to encourage them to kind of take these steps?
Well, I suppose a wise person once told me, "How do you how do you eat an elephant?"
mm, I don't think I've heard that one.
It's one bite at a time. So the key to not getting overwhelmed is taking it one step at a time, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Starting with just writing down what your goals are, knowing how much you have left over every month to actually allocate towards those goals. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like give yourself enough time to actually achieve those goals in a
Mm-hmm.
way
Yeah.
that's
True.
balanced. Yeah, I think balance is key when it comes to finances because once we start putting a lot of pressure or we're comparing ourselves to other people who might be in very different places,
Mm-hmm.
then all these factors start to produce emotions that aren't helpful towards achieving our goals.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah, money isn't just about the numbers too. It's so very much about the emotions.
That's true.
Whether you feel anxious or you feel, sad or worried or excited, whatever it is, there's a lot of emotions linked to money.
Well, that's an interesting point that you made there, because that kind of leads me to my next question. Do you think that the present consumer culture has a way of impacting getting out of debt and improving our overall financial health? The need or the emotions involved in purchasing and that kind of thing, do those impede us in the environment that we're currently existing
Hmm. Absolutely. I would say 100%. This culture we're in doesn't encourage delayed gratification, right? We
Mm-hmm.
get everything instantly. You walk into a store, everything's there. If it's not there, it's on Amazon or it's somewhere where you can get it as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So I truly feel that because of that lack of delayed gratification, that muscle, like we haven't really trained that muscle, you're
Mm-hmm.
more
Mm-hmm.
likely to look towards, say, debt or credit to supplement your lifestyle when that really shouldn't be the case.
Right.
You should be able to plan ahead for big purchases. Actually say, okay, do I need a new iPhone? If I do, how much is it? How many months is it going to take to save enough to buy it? All those
Mm-hmm.
questions. Yeah. So if we were able to actually take a step back and ask a few questions before, like big purchases or most purchases, I think it would help to reduce that, go, 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 consume, 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 and really help us be more intentional with our
Yeah.
spending.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
Mhm.
sense. So, have you found that there is a financial management or financial capability gap between men and women? I know a lot of the work you do is with women, helping them to manage their expenses and to build wealth. Why is this so important?
It's really, really important to me because while technically we don't have a capability gap, like there's
Mm-hmm.
no real difference between men and women, the difference comes in things like us as women not earning as much as men for the same role, same job,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that impacts our disposable income. And I've realized that there are a lot of challenges that we face in
Mm-hmm.
terms of it's not a thing of the past yet.
True.
So that often means that as women, compared to a male um, in the same position, same company, we tend to make less. Because of that, we don't have as much money to put away. Plus, let's not forget, we certainly spend more on self care, and then there's the pink tax.
Yes, that's
when
true.
you're
That's true. Yes, true.
Yeah. So there's that. And oftentimes women take time out of working to care for family members, whether it's their children, like going on mat leave, or maybe a parent or an elderly person in their
Mm-hmm.
family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Most times it falls on women. I wonder why that is. But
That's true. That's probably a discussion for another podcast.
yeah, yeah, for sure. That's a full thing on its own. So that's another reason why we tend to have less income, less to put away. Also, when it comes to investing, I find that women tend to be a bit more on the conservative side than
Mm-hmm.
men. We're less likely to take risk, and that can impact the returns we get on our investment.
Yeah.
So I tend to coach a lot of women through that to help them actually feel more comfortable taking risks so that their
Mm-hmm.
money can grow. And once we've got a plan in place, though, women tend to follow a disciplined strategy more so than men. So,
Okay. Okay. So I guess it's what a trade-off between the two.
yeah. So we're good long term. We're very good long term as long as we stick to the strategy and we're able to invest appropriately.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of, women's lifespans, how, sometimes we tend to
Mm.
live longer than men. So is
Yes.
that also impact our investments or how we manage those investments?
Yes, it certainly does. That's a great question. So, um, facts do show that women outlive men or tend to live longer than men, which means that we also need a lot more money to last us through our lifetime. Most women also end up having to take on, managing the household finances, especially
Mm-hmm.
later in life. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
sometimes that can be daunting because chances are they've never done that before. And all
Yeah.
of a sudden, they're left to look after the finances, and they're trying to figure out how best to do that.
Okay. So we now have access to, so much technology than ever before. Do you think that like finance apps have a role to play in helping people better manage their relationships with money?
Yeah, absolutely. Like that can help with the education aspect of it.
Okay.
There are lots of tools out there. There are, courses you could take um, with apps, especially for banking, for instance. That gives you ease of access, so you know what's going on with your money all the time,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Yeah, once you have that visibility, like you know what's going on, I feel it's not as much of a taboo subject because it's there. It's easy for you to just tap into it, see what's going on, make adjustments if you need to. So it can definitely help us to be better with our money. There are lots of blogs as well on money management. There's just
Mm-hmm.
so much information
Yeah.
that I think having that access to information
Okay.
helps.
I guess in line with, new ways of thinking and, what are your thoughts on the FIRE movement, which, as you know, stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, which all sounds very appealing to me, I have to say.
Sure, sounds appealing to everyone. Oh, retire early. Well, there are a few pros and cons for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with the good stuff. Like, I like that it gets people thinking about increasing that gap between income and expenses,
Mm-hmm.
because that is like the secret sauce for being able to do things financially. The more you can reduce how much you're spending, the more you have to save, right?
Yeah.
In some instances, you might have to start a side hustle, or maybe you have a passion project you'd like to begin that could make you an income. That's great. Like, it's nice to have supplemental income,
Mm-hmm.
but I find it's easiest to control your expenses.
Yeah.
Of
Okay.
course, when you live in countries or places where the cost of living or the standard of living is high, that might get harder and harder to achieve, right?
True. Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah, for sure.
here in Vancouver, it's expensive. It's expensive to like pay rent, food, all these things. It really does cost a lot. So it might not always be feasible
Yeah.
to
I,
significantly reduce expenses.
I think we can identify with that in Barbados as well.
Yeah. So I also like that with that people start thinking about investing. Like, there's a focus on how can I make my money work for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we need to have that mindset if we want to accumulate wealth.
Yeah.
You have to get every dollar working for you. So those are some of the things I really like about, I guess, the FIRE movement. Um, Cons. I do think it's somewhat unrealistic,
Mm-hmm.
especially if your income isn't such that it's significantly higher than your expenses.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There are a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck, and not necessarily because their expenses are high, but because that's what they're earning, that's what they are able to earn, and that's just the cost of living.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's not accessible to everyone. It can put a lot of pressure on individuals too. It goes back to the idea of comparing yourself to other people, or not being happy where you're at. I'm all about balance and financial well-being. So
Mm-hmm.
these are some of the things that popped out. I'm like, oh no, now you're going to be like, I have to get here in like 10 years. And
Yeah.
it's absolutely nuts, right? So it really is about balance. You maybe in achieving retirement by age 45,
Mm-hmm.
you've given up so much along the way that you're so sad.
True. And I mean, the other thing is, it's one thing to retire early, but I guess we don't know how long we'll live, how long we have
Right.
to sustain this lifestyle, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. And don't you think it sounds better to like along the way, do the things you actually love while
Yes.
still planning towards your goals.
Yeah. Instead of
Yeah,
waiting, hanging everything on retirement, as we don't know what retirement will look like when we get there.
exactly. I
Yeah.
just keep having this image of traveling and not actually being able to get in the water because I'm afraid I'm gonna fall over or something.
But you think you'll be too old to enjoy it?
Yeah.
Fair enough. I
So
agree. Do what we can now within reason.
yeah,
It's true. It's
exactly.
true. So,
Yeah. So I think it should be more about balance. It's a good goal to have like financial independence, but remember it means something different to everyone.
mhm,
And really, financial independence for me might just mean being debt free, which means I don't owe anybody anything, and I have enough to cover my expenses, for the next however many years. But
great.
yeah, it's different for everyone.
So I know we're clearly living in challenging times, and many people have lost their jobs or have seen their disposable income kind of reduced. What advice do you have, for them with regard to personal finance and investing, especially at a time where markets and I guess the whole world really is quite volatile?
Yeah, we've seen quite a lot of volatility, honestly, in the last, 3 months or so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, You know, most of it comes down to managing your expenses. It is a good time to put money away or invest because in times when people are fearful, as Warren Buffett says, that's when you should be greedy. And when
Mm-hmm.
people are greedy, when you should be
Be
fearful.
fearful. Yes.
Yeah, so it is a good time to put money away. I do have clients take a look at how much they're able to, within reason, still invest systematically. That way, you're not thinking about it. You don't have to make a conscious decision, and it's not necessarily something that will cause you stress. But you're doing something for your future at a time when it makes sense.
Okay.
So that is something to consider or think about. Um, Prior to this, emergency savings is something that I talk about a lot. It's important for you to have an emergency fund,
Mm-hmm.
usually about 3 months minimum of expenses, 3 to 6 months. That way you have that safety and you feel like you can handle anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, lastly, what is the best piece of financial advice that you share? If we take nothing else away from this episode, what should we remember?
Start early. Compound interest is amazing. And so if you don't quite understand that Google compound interest, the power that has on, multiplying your wealth or your net worth is astounding. And the only way to really take advantage of it is by starting early to put money away.
Okay. I will definitely, remember that. I feel I've, made some strides, but definitely I feel there are things that I could do more of. So thanks, Damilola, for sharing your insights with us today. Hopefully it gets people thinking more about their financial health and wealth. So thanks again. It was a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. This was great. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to join us every other Wednesday for another episode of Shak. Subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast platform. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also connect with us on IG, Facebook, and Twitter, or by email at akilia@shakshak.club. Let's shake things up.